Thank you, John. 3 decades, my goodness. I was 4-year-old when I started, believe it or not, but it seems a lot longer than it actually is. John's opening at the very beginning was quite pertinent for me in terms of putting things in perspective. The perspective being cybersecurity is very, very important to all of us. You know, it keeps our companies profitable, it allows us to guard against attacks, but it's nowhere near as important as human health. And, you know, to beat a life-threatening illness from the outset is pretty impressive, but puts things in perspective. So well done, John. Secondly, John's card system about if you're out of time, he's going to raise the red card. And as a Newcastle United supporter, I've got no aversion to seeing red cards being lifted here. So be quite, I don't mind, but I'll stay within time, I promise. So yeah, as John said, my background, I've been in technology sales for about 30 years, for the past 10 years, 15 years in cybersecurity. Predominantly in the UK, across the Middle East and Africa, and some experience in North America as well. Joined a very exciting organisation who are one of today's sponsors, ZoneFox. We're up the stairs. We were founded 7 years ago out of Napier University in Edinburgh, and the original ethos of the product wasn't about preventing bad stuff or finding bad people, but was essentially invented to prove innocence of a certain individual. So what do I mean by that? We were faced with the opportunity of a company that was linked to the university who had a senior executive who was about to be fired because they thought that he had accessed and shared data that he shouldn't have. When in actual fact, we developed a solution 7 years ago that managed to prove his innocence by virtue of the fact that his account was compromised and it wasn't him that was the threat actor. So security seems to have a very negative connotation when you look at what traditional companies do, but in actual fact, what we started doing then and what we still do to this day very much protects your employees and allows you to prove innocence and prove integrity in a lot of cases. We've got just under 50 customers globally. We're based, headquartered in Edinburgh in Scotland, and we've got a stand upstairs. We'd be delighted to talk to you throughout the course of today. One of the key case studies we talk about, and this is not a sales pitch, this is to talk about predominantly insider threat and life beyond GDPR. And we're not GDPR experts, but there are plenty in the room. But one of our key case studies was Rockstar Games, and we essentially protect the code for Grand Theft Auto that's released every 6 months. So we're pretty proud of that. And they're one of our larger customers that we have on a global basis. So life after GDPR, what's going to happen? There's been lots of fear, uncertainty and doubt out there. If you look at InfoSec last year, this year, next year, won't be so bad, but everybody and their dog has got a GDPR solution. Everybody can solve your GDPR problem. Not the case. Similarly with us as a company, we've got solutions that help you understand what's happening internally, but we don't have an end-to-end GDPR solution. So there are plenty of facts around GDPR, and there's plenty of FUD around GDPR, but this is a FUD-free zone, if you like. Just over 18 years ago, we had a very large, compelling event around year 2000. And again, it was the same scenario where we had lots of hype, lots of IT spend, lots of scaremongering. And on January the 1st, 2000, the world kept spinning. It didn't stop spinning. People didn't lose their jobs. Companies kept growing. Companies kept making profit. So it's slightly similar to GDPR. And come the 25th of May, 3 months today, I don't see a huge amount of news hitting the press. I think we'll still be in a position where businesses are ongoing. They'll be continuing to elevate their security posture. They'll be doing what they can. But there's no massive compelling event 3 months from today. I just think it's the start of a new era in terms of how people view this. As the previous speaker said, the ICO do not have a chance in hell of being able to come and legislate every single organisation that breaches GDPR. But obviously there's going to be some big targets along the way. As I said earlier, there's no such thing as a silver bullet, although many vendors would have you think that there is. We believe there's not. For us, it's about the classification of the data that you hold in your organisation and how you treat that data and how you control that data. And it's about having a plan. It's about the inevitability of perhaps you will be the next breach. And if so, what do you do? What is your action plan? Because that's as important around GDPR as protection of not being breached, obviously. And the traditional controls and perimeters, you know, they're old-fashioned and they just don't work. Excuse me. So the traditional controls continuing to put controls at the perimeter. Where is the perimeter these days? The perimeter is constantly moving. The perimeter is no longer at the external part of your business. You've got partners, you've got employees, you've got consultants. So it's a virtual perimeter these days. So the continuation of doing the same things over and over and expecting a different outcome would be akin to Einstein's theory around insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different outcome. Even this week, you know, I could have a slide deck of 25 to 50 slides of all the breaches, all the news items that have hit us over the last couple of years. But within the last week, 3 pertinent ones would be The Guardian, a significant government figure saying that it's not a matter of if, but when. And I think everybody subscribes to that in the room, that we could all be the next target. So vigilance is the key. Secondly, Carphone Warehouse seems to have been in the press for years, but eventually this week it was announced that they had a £400,000 fine. Post 25th of May, that scenario might have been significantly more. So maybe that happened earlier, I'm not sure. And as early as the day before yesterday, NHS Wales had an issue whereby a nurse was leaking information, sensitive information, patient information. They took action on the nurse, but it really elevates the position of NHS Wales in terms of their security posture and how they got caught out. Every organisation's got staff, your most important asset, also sometimes your biggest threat as well. And there was a survey of over 600 CISOs published recently by the Ponemon report, and they accepted that the insider threat, the human error, not malicious actor, but accidental actor, was by far the #1 threat in any organisation. We built our business around that. It's not a sales pitch, as I said. We built our business around that, but we see that all the time, that's the part that people seem to leave till last, and that's the part that we hopefully address very well. So what can we do? I mean, the attacks are increasing. I need to check my audience here for millennials. How many people have heard of Dad's Army? Just a quick show of hands. Thank goodness for that. So if that's your traditional defence on the left-hand side, the traditional attack that's coming at you is on the right-hand side. So we have to get a little bit different and a little bit smarter about how we respond, about how we actually detect and how we respond to the traditional threats. How do we do that? We do that in a number of ways. We use technology, we use people, but let's use the power of machine learning. And that's pretty much where we're coming from on this. So what's the problem? We're getting close to Easter. I'm assuming most of us like cream eggs and chocolate and stuff like that, but the whole cybersecurity problem over the last 20 years could be summed up by looking at a cream egg. A cream egg, after it's been in the fridge, has got a very crusty, very hard exterior, and it's very well protected. But once you break that exterior and get on the inside, the gooey part that's uncontrollable on the inside is effectively the data and also the people around that data. So that's our cream egg scenario. So, you know, we don't have any cream eggs with us. We should have had some cream eggs on stand, Laura, I think, but we don't have any with us. But effectively, it kind of sums up the problem. And if I explain cybersecurity to my young children or to my elderly parents, I would explain it's like a cream egg, and it's about the hard exterior and the valuable stuff on the inside. And gaining control of that is a massive challenge. So addressing this, the kind of 101 of UBA, user behaviour analytics, and that's kind of what we're about and what our business is based on. Harnessing the power of machine learning obviously goes much faster, it's much more scalable in terms of the human element and being able to spot stuff that's different, not necessarily bad, but different from the norm. And I've got a graph to show you in a second or two that will explain that slightly better. Building a profile of a user over time, so in collecting data from all your users and how they're doing their job on a day-to-day basis, but then over time building up a normality level or raising the baseline in terms of what's good and what's bad, what's accepted, what's not accepted. User controls, Active Directory super users can be a challenge, but again, understanding what these people are doing within your organisation to be able to effectively police and control and gather more data around what's right, what's wrong, what's good for the business, what's not necessarily good for the business. Peer group analysis, really interesting around examples we've had of large organisations who have maybe 50 or 60 accountants working in their business. Of the 50 accountants, 49 generally do the same thing at the same time most days, access the same types of data in the same types of areas. But one of those accountants does things slightly differently. Not necessarily bad, but anomalous, so it's worth investigation. And that's the human element that any traditional rules-based detection system would not pick up. It would certainly miss that. And comparing an individual's behaviour this week to last week or the week before. Another real-life example of a large sales organisation. that we did some work with were able to detect the likelihood of certain salespeople leaving the organisation. Akin to that probably years ago, but in my own scenario, that you do change as a person when you're about to leave an organisation. Your liability goes up, your loyalty goes down, what you do, working hours, various things changes, and it's difficult to spot that from a human-to-human scenario. But when you put machine learning in place, you can actually start to detect that. And with this particular organisation, we were able to fairly accurately predict a whole bunch of people that were about to leave, a large motor manufacturer, about to leave their organisation. So education and people are the key. It's about roles, education and vigilance. And the other thing to think about here is it's about training as well, and understanding that as individuals, it's so easy to get caught out. We had a scenario internally where one of our developers clicked on a link accidentally from an email, and they were effectively phished. They panicked, but immediately went to the CTO and said, I think I've done something rather silly. But that open communication, that culture of not being afraid to put your hand up and say, I've done something silly, is what we need to embrace and further continue to do throughout any organisation. The whole cyber thing, getting phished and getting caught out, seems to be an area that's feared, and it shouldn't be the case. It should be an open and key communication amongst all employees. So any successful team, things happen, things change. Various people, my account's been compromised, top talent, people will be malicious with their actions, people will be accidental. I think something like 82% of all insider challenges, insider threats are generated by accidental behaviour, not necessarily malicious. Of course, there will always be malicious actors out there. There'll be employees with a grievance, but the vast majority, as I said, are insiders that are making mistakes. Perhaps under pressure, workload, hadn't had adequate training, stuff like that. It all leads to the same thing, data potentially leaving your organisation, which is valuable. So this is the graph on how the machine learning works in terms of peer group analysis. So I'll build this up. So we've got engineering, we've got sales team, we've got finance, we've got facilities, and pretty broadly speaking, they're working within the same parameters of each other within their actual department. And this is how the UBA analytics works in terms of adding machine learning to this. Bottom left, statistically, there's someone very, very different. And it says here bad guy, AKA bad guy, perhaps, but perhaps just a little bit different. So it's about spotting this anomalous behaviour and investigating it. And effectively, this gives us the ability to cut the wood from the chaff and be able to go straight to this different person and understand why they're different. You know, you interview the person, you understand what's going on, and you realise what they're doing is actually quite right. We need to perhaps create another group for this. But it just allows you to spot that anomalous behaviour and then decide whether it's good, bad or indifferent for the business. And we refer to AI as augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. Augmented on the basis that it's a mix of AI and machine learning with the human element, hence the augmented part. So when we refer to AI, if you speak to us upstairs at any point later on, AI for us is augmented intelligence. And in terms of what this looks like in production, a weekly graph of your sales team, weekly graph of your bunch of accountants, of all your staff, we can then detect that something very different, and let me be clear about that, not necessarily bad, but something very different is happening at 8 PM on Wednesday. So let's look at that, rather than scan lots of different stuff that's happening over 24 hours a day, over 7 days. So I touched on this earlier, and very, very important in my opinion. This business is about people. Cybersecurity is about people. People cause the problem, people have the resolution. I personally have been phished, and I'm pretty techie savvy when it comes to cybersecurity. It's very easy. They're very, very clever. So it's developing a culture internally with your people around not having the fear of any recrimination about putting your hand up and saying, I think I've done something silly, or I think I've been caught out. And it's having that relationship with your senior managers and also the board. It's a board level issue around people and the development of this type of culture. So what should we do, in my opinion? This hype is overhyped. I'm not underestimating it. I think it's very important. It's certainly driven a lot of interest. It's driven a lot of budget line in a lot of large organisations. Many of you today will have budgets this year you didn't have last year, specifically around GDPR. But I'm assuming most of that will be spent on people, process, probably a little bit of technology and a mix of the both. So in our opinion, it's not necessarily another year 2000, but it's another large event. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. And today's the 25th of January. Happy Robert Burns Day from Scotland. Thank you very much.
Neill.